to be presenting not only the first presentation of the recruiting period, but also it's an honor to be presenting on Teachers' Day. Because for me, the presentation that I've prepared is designed to, oh my gosh, Anara's joining, is designed to show you a little bit about at least what I teach in the field of multilingual education and how I present it as a lecturer. You won't get the full feeling of how I organize a class. For that, you'll have to ask the many current and former students who are joining the talk today. But my goal is to give a little bit, oh my goodness. So we just have Dr. Kara Fleming joining from KeyMep. So again, what I want to say is that the main purpose of the presentation today, the original purpose, was to give you an overview of what we study in the multilingual education program and give you a chance to reflect on whether this program is appropriate for you. But since I see that there are so many participants who have already heard much of what I talk about in the course, I'm wondering if I should change gears and instead present the findings from my latest research project, which my research team and I are getting ready to present back to the sites we collected data from next week. So maybe if in the chat box you could indicate a preference for my research topic or my teaching topic, and then I will load the presentation and give my talk. It's not just you, Kara. 90% of the participants are already my students, LOL.
Gotcha.
Okay. Then let me open this file. And I will start sharing the PowerPoint. And again, this is a presentation that we have designed for non-specialists in multilingual education. So I will present the slides, but then I will overlay the slides with the more academic terminology that I would normally use in this presentation. And I also apologize to my students in advance that because of that, I don't have a lot of the theoretical citations in here that I would normally have for an academic presentation, but I don't want to spend another 20 minutes digging up the PowerPoint that I use for those slides. But the research project that I got a faculty competitive development grant on is on what we're calling to stakeholders developing academic skills in 3 languages, what we call in our research project developing genre knowledge. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by genre knowledge. But first, I need to say that I am part of a team of researchers. I happen to be the principal investigator of this project, but I work very closely with faculty members Sulu Shashkaramkulova, Jason Sparks, 2 PhD students, and 4 MA and multilingual education graduates. Actually, Sarek and Marat worked on the project for a summer when they were still students. Camilla and Dastan were also hired as students and then hired to stay on when our project got paused because of the pandemic, and we got permission to extend the project to the end of the year. So it's very collaborative with students in that sense, and also interdisciplinary because Sue, Shash, and Jason actually work more in higher education. And especially when I get to the end of the presentation, you'll see more of the higher education influence as well as the multilingual education influence. So, and again, we recorded this as a video in 3 languages. So what I'm going to do here in this presentation is simply present the research findings. Oops. The research questions, our methodology, and our main findings from across 6 universities in Kazakhstan. And in particular, we chose these universities because they were receiving funding from the state program for innovative industrial development. I think that's what the acronym stands for, the SPEED program. And along with that, they were either establishing English medium of instruction, so преподавание на английском языке, английский язык как язык обучения in Russian, or have developed polylingual programs where students are expected to take 50% of their courses in one language, 20% in another language, and 30% in a third language. And then I will explain the next phase of our research project with the reflections and the discussion. So again, for our stakeholders, because the teachers and students and certainly administrators have varying levels of language proficiency in English, we've made a glossary for them. I will skip that part. Our research questions and methods, first our research questions. Our first question is, to what extent do students in English as a medium of instruction or polylingual programs say they develop academic skills in 3 languages? And again, in academic language, we would use the term genre knowledge in 3 languages. Then how do students apply skills and knowledge across languages? And here, when I use the word apply, in the academic context, when we're talking about language development, I would use the term transfer. And transfer in the literature is often thought of as negative transfer, right? When you think bateria and you say battery in English, and they mean 2 different things, of course, or is it batereka? I get it mixed up. But the point is, we often think of a negative transfer of knowledge in the L1 to the 2nd or 3rd language. But more recent scholars like Heim and Pavlenko argue that transfer can be positive, and it can go from the L1 to the L2 or from the L2 back to the L1. The recent paper I published with Phil Montgomery, we are arguing based on our institutional research that that our students at NU GSE develop genre knowledge so highly in English that they end up transferring those skills to Russian and Kazakh, and sometimes that transfer is received positively, and sometimes that transfer is received negatively, and they have to adjust and use different skills for Kazakh and Russian. And you'll see related issues in this presentation today. Then our third question is, what institutional resources help students develop academic skills in English? And we're about to submit a paper for publication that breaks those resources or those types of supports down into structural, pedagogical, linguistic, and cultural. Both supports and general factors that contribute. Because again, Nazarbayev University is very well resourced in this aspect, but is not perfect. What do other universities have and what do they need? This is our question. And then as a follow-up, what institutional supports might still be needed to help students develop academic skills in English, Kazakh, and Russian? In this third question, we focused mostly on English because we imagine that's where the most challenge is, but we recognize that we're looking at English within a multilingual context. And that, again, if they're in polylingual programs, there are expectations among the three languages. As I'm talking, if you have questions, feel free to write them in the chat. And then either Idana can review and interrupt me, or we can try to answer the questions at the end. I can't see the chat and present at the same time. All right, so when we talk about academic skills, we're using Christine Tardy's framework of genre knowledge that breaks academic skills or genre knowledge down into 4 parts. The one that most students and teachers and even administrators are most familiar with is formal knowledge. So knowledge of grammar, knowledge of vocabulary, knowledge of how to organize a text and the structure of a text. Probably for IELTS, you learned the 5-paragraph essay format. We also, in our instrument, include questions on citing sources and means of citing sources as formal knowledge of how to write for different genres. The second type of genre knowledge is subject matter knowledge. This includes field-specific terminology. This includes knowing where the gaps in the literature are. Keep in mind, our research is with postgraduate students, master's and PhD programs, and students and teachers and administrators, because it's in those programs that students are expected to make a contribution to knowledge. They're even at the PhD level expected to publish in impact factor journals by the end of the program. I also added and argued that subject matter knowledge includes knowing who the key researchers are in the field. So anyone who finishes my course and doesn't know who Nancy Hornberger is, doesn't know who Ophelia Garcia is, they have failed as a student and I have failed as a teacher as far as I'm concerned. Because they've done groundbreaking work in terms of contributing to particular understandings of multilingual education. The third type, which in our study, and we used a slightly different framework, but in our institutional study we found is rather challenging for students, is rhetorical knowledge. And in this case, rhetorical knowledge is defined as knowing how to communicate with your audience. So being aware of the goal of the text. Why am I writing this essay? Is it to get into the university? Is it to tick the box and complete the course or the program? Or is it to tell a story, to make an argument? Knowing who your reading audience is. Again, in our program, we have students writing master's theses, and sometimes we say, well, pretend you're writing for a friend, which helps you to relax and to write more, but then your friend probably already knows what NIS is. They probably already know what Darn schools are. They probably already know what trilingual education policy is. So in some cases in our program, you have to write for multiple audiences at once. And you have to be aware of your audience and how to adjust what you're saying in order to meet your audience's needs. Although some argue that is specific to English and not found as much in Russian and Kazakh. And others argue that that view is an oversimplistic view of both English and Russian and Kazakh. But again, we'll talk a little bit later when I present the findings about why that perception might be true, perception of the differences, I mean. And then finally, persuasiveness, knowing how to persuade your audience to believe something or to do something. And again, I want to say that these are not comprehensive components. These are just examples of elements of each form of knowledge that we think are representative of this knowledge and that are part of what we included in our survey questions to students. The final is process knowledge, is knowing the steps involved in publishing an article, knowing how to draft, knowing how to choose a journal and make sure it's not a fake journal, knowing how to submit, knowing how to respond to reviewers. I only learned that this year after 6 years in the field. Presenting at a conference, knowing how to write an abstract, knowing how to prepare a PowerPoint for presentation, knowing how to deliver it, not too fast, not too slow, and in a way that conveys the key points in the time allowed. Knowing how to skip slides if you don't have enough time, which many people don't. Or how to conduct an information search, how to find literature, which keywords to use, which databases to look in. And students tend to be pretty skilled at this to a point. All right, any key questions before I move on? Okay then. So our research design, this was a mixed method study, meaning we used both quantitative and qualitative methods. And let me see if I can keep track of them. Quantitative is количество, qualitative is качество. Yes, did I get that right? All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm always scared with those words. All right. So again, we looked at a mix of both national and regional universities and comprehensive universities, meaning they have both natural sciences and social sciences, and specialized universities, so technical universities. For the quantitative, we designed a survey and we had experts review the survey to see that they agreed with how we were sorting items into our theoretical categories for genre knowledge, our 4 categories of master's and PhD programs, and we asked them to self-assess. So in the field of language assessment, there are sites that offer can-do statements where you say, you agree or disagree with the statement. I can identify key scholars in my field. So we asked these questions about the extent to which students say they can do different skills across the 4 types of genre knowledge across the different languages. I can do this in Kazakh, I can do this in English, I can do this in Russian. And then we asked them the value of different institutional supports. So are there academic mobility programs? How important are they to you? For the qualitative, and this was all done at the same time, we conducted focus group interviews or sometimes individual interviews with students and faculty. And again, we would have a group of students and we would talk to them sometimes from the same program, sometimes from different programs, and we would have groups of faculty and we would talk to the faculty. We would never put students and faculty together because no one normally wants to admit the challenges they're facing in front of each other. Then we did individual interviews with administrators. And overall, again, this was all conducted between November of 2018 and April of 2019. So over, wow, almost 2 years ago, 1.5 to 2 years ago. So across the 6 sites, we collected almost 300 student surveys. We interviewed 43 students. We interviewed 34 faculty members and 30 administrators. And again, for the focus groups, I would say we had anywhere between 4 and 10 students or 4 and 10 faculty members in a group. Any more than 10 is really too much. 6 to 8 is the ideal number for a focus group because you want people to agree or disagree with each other within the group, and you want people to feel safe talking to each other in the group so that you get richer data. All right. Are there any questions about how we collected the data? I didn't include here how we analyzed the data, but if you do have questions about that, I can try to answer that after the presentation, because the data analysis gets rather complex. But we do have a very rigorous approach to that. But again, we're now trying to speak to stakeholders and trying to simplify what we're saying. And we give them more glossary. So in terms of academic skills, in terms of genre knowledge in 3 languages, and again, the PowerPoint is phrased to communicate directly to the universities that participated in our study, to get them to see how much they identify with what we're saying in this PowerPoint. The first thing we find is that students are very motivated to learn English, and they're motivated because they see English as the language of science. They see English as a means to communicate with foreign students and international professors, and they see English, and sometimes this is a policy and sometimes it's a perception, they see English as a means to academic mobility. They see English as having opportunities for work in Kazakhstan and abroad, and for travel abroad. Actually, they see a range of reasons to study in English, and so they're very highly motivated. And teachers as well, in general, the ones we talk to, are very motivated to teach in English as well for similar reasons. Students seem to have self-study practices. I think of the Russian term samostoятельность, right? Self-reliance. When they felt that they couldn't get enough language or content support from the university, or if they didn't have time to go to language classes, they simply started learning the language on their own. And I think we have to give students credit for that. I'm sure our professor Anas Hajar, who studies language learning strategies, would be very interested in learning more about this. In general, in our survey, we found that students' skills were higher in Russian, then Kazakh, then English, but I caution that most of the sites we went to were in Russian dominant environments, meaning we were in the north, the east, and the center, and even when we were in the south, we were in Almaty, where there's a stronger Russian than Kazakh language preference. If we had gone to Tashkent, Shymkent or Taraz or Uralsk or Atarau, we might have gotten different results. We find that students are able to use their skills among the language or transfer the skills somewhat. Sometimes it comes out as translation, but in general, they do feel that they have this capacity. And many of them talk about their development of the 4 skills: reading, writing, speaking, listening. And they tend to think of their development within the framework of those 4 skills. So one student who talks about her development in a national comprehensive university says, before enrollment, I had more creative writing skills. We had a completely different essay format when I did the major of an English teacher, but now it's more scientific. There is a different format. Every week we write different essays on all subjects. For example, extended essay, various theoretical works. And I think our own master's students, especially those who come from philology, can relate to this finding. Because again, for us as scholars of genre knowledge, this indicates a shift in awareness of genre, an awareness of a different structure for writing and a different purpose for writing that is specifically targeted to master's level work. At the same time, there are challenges. Hold on. I see we have 2. Oh, all right. All right, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't have any participants who were trying to get admitted, and I just saw a message that's important, so that's okay. Anyway, so coming back to what our challenges are, or what universities indicate the challenges are, what our data indicate the challenges are for universities is, number one, students seem to have more development of formal knowledge than the other types for all three languages. So there's a lot of focus on grammar and vocabulary, but not as much on writing for a purpose and writing for a particular audience. And I have found this in my general experience with universities as well. And one of our goals is to try to encourage universities to develop academic writing programs and teaching programs and teaching teachers how to think beyond grammar and vocabulary, but to the whole purpose of the text. Our Professor Michelle Bedeker is also very interested in this issue and in working with teachers on this issue. The skill self-reports are associated or correlated with IELTS scores. So when we run the quantitative analysis, there's a correlation between what students say they can or cannot do and their IELTS scores, but not their GPA. And what we are arguing, what we are interpreting, is that the grades that the students are getting in the university are not reflecting actual abilities. So they're, and from based on the qualitative data, and I'd have to look again at the direction of the quantitative data, but I believe what this is saying is that the GPAs are actually higher than their abilities suggest. They're getting high marks, but they're not developing all of these skills at the level we would like them to. On a theoretical note, what our PhD student, Andrei Sherbakov with Asel Kembatarova did is they did a factor analysis and some other analyses to test whether our questions were appropriate for Kazakh and Russian languages, because the literature is all done around English. And it was found on a theoretical level that what we were calling genre knowledge is not, the Kazakh and Russian answers don't fit that theoretical framework. And Andrei is working with Dastan now on trying to write a paper on just the quantitative analysis and just this finding. On the other hand, maybe it doesn't matter. And I say this somewhat ironically, but not seriously, because a lot of the students don't see a need for academic skills in Kazakh and Russian because, quote, English is the language of science. And why do we need to be able to write a research paper in Kazakh or Russian? As one teacher said to me after the interview, we drink tea in Kazakh. But, you know, in terms of hierarchy and social justice of languages, I want to see languages treated equally. And also as someone who works with students on research projects where we need to be able to communicate findings to different audiences in different languages, I do see a need for some of these skills. And our alumni see a need for some of these skills in Kazakh and Russian as well as English. If they're studying in 3 languages, they need at least some of these skills in 3 languages. So somehow when we go back to the sites, we'll have to see what the conversation is around that and what the ideas are for addressing this question. All right. Any questions before I go on to the next slide? And I hope someone's keeping time. The farther I get in my professorship, the more I can say about less. When I recorded this, this was a 20-minute presentation. I think now it's going to be a 40-minute because I have so much to say. So please feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. In terms of applying skills and knowledge across language or transferring skills. So the students, as I said, are often able to apply skills and knowledge from their mother tongue, whether it's Russian or Kazakh, we don't know. We only ask them to specify родной язык to English. An interesting finding from analyzing the survey data is students with high proficiency in both Russian and Kazakh So students who report the same high proficiency in both languages show a stronger ability to transfer skills to English. So what we argue from the theoretical lens of transfer is that the fact that you're able to transfer skills among languages is a marker of proficiency. It's part of having that proficiency. On the other hand, students and faculty see translation from one language to another as a challenge. And interesting, they don't complain as white monolingual teachers often do about translation itself. They complain about how people are translating. As one person said, there's no competency in the direct translation from Kazakh to English or from English to Kazakh. They always have to pass through this middle stage in Russian. So for us as multilingual education scholars, from a translanguaging perspective that argues that English and Kazakh and Russian are all part of one system in the brain, in theory, it shouldn't matter whether they are translating from English to Russian and then Russian to Kazakh, or directly from English to Kazakh. You use whatever languages are available in your repertoire to help you make the shift. But for the teachers, they see this as a weakness, as a deficit. So again, we will gently try to point out to stakeholders why this is okay, and then see how the stakeholders respond to that viewpoint. In terms of pedagogical policies and practices, as I said, we had these 4 factors: pedagogical, linguistic, structural, and cultural. For time, we're only focusing on pedagogical and structural here, because that's where a lot of the challenge is. The faculty members, the teachers tell us, oh, we do a range of activities. We do, we use different genres that are specific to the discipline. If it's psychology class, they write a profile. If it's chemistry class, they write a flow chart. The teachers are very willing to switch to Kazakh or Russian in classes designated for English if they see the students don't understand. So even though the official policy is English in these universities, the faculty members look into students' eyes and adjust their language use based on the perceived proficiency of their students. The students are more mixed about this. Some of them find this convenient, others find it a waste of time, especially if they studied abroad and they are highly proficient in English. To have to switch for other students slows them down. And teachers also complained about the multi-level groups, about having to deal with students who are sometimes A1 level trying to study in a master's program in English. As for the challenges, there are many. Students report primarily lecture-based teaching. I mentioned about multi-level groups. The students complain that faculty have low English proficiency, and I've been rereading the data, and even some of the faculty members themselves are not sure about their proficiency. There's an issue around plagiarism. One teacher from a regional specialized university said, if I ask them to do anything in English, it's copy and paste from an English source. And then there's a lot of training in language to develop students and teachers English, but not in how to teach in English. So to me, that means some professors don't change their teaching. They teach the same whether they're teaching in the first or the third language. As one professor said, it's just one practice in different languages. And some of them will just translate their slides. And if we look at literature on CLIL and other literature on teaching in a second or third or foreign language, there are ways to scaffold the learning and make adjustments, particularly for students with lower levels of proficiency, to make it more comprehensible. And then finally, administrators say students need not only language and content, but they need soft skills. They need to know how to learn. They need to know how to recognize new knowledge. They need leadership, creative thinking, and critical thinking skills. So it's easy for us in multilingual education to only think about language. But language in higher education is actually nested in a range of skills that have to be developed. And arguably, and I think Kara will join me in this in the end, there are a lot of scholars who look at how to teach these skills through teaching a foreign language or an additional language or a second language. All right, in terms of institutional resources, again, the strengths, students valued and teachers valued academic partnerships and mobility, internships, or for technical universities, partnerships with industry, having international faculty come and visit, online resources like Scopus and Web of Science. And here one teacher in particular talks about how these partnerships contributed to her skills development. I remember I had one professor from the US. She helped us to write a proper paper and how to apply it to make sure that we not go to bogus journals, right? So there was something in here about the structure of the paper perhaps, but also the process knowledge of how to submit to a journal. On the other hand, the library resources are very limited. The student says it's very difficult to find a textbook or other books you need. They're in Kazakh and Russian. I just go to the internet. Other students, I've been rereading the data. They say, oh, we're told to go to the National Library, but they don't have much either. So people are relying on the internet for the knowledge base that they need. Some other supports and challenges. A big one is student admissions. So some universities, they have criteria, they require IELTS scores, they have university testing. Others, they use national tests where you can get 30 or 50 points out of 100 and still get into the program. Or in one university, there were students who actually enrolled in Kazakh or Russian medium groups, had A1 level English, and were forced into polylingual groups. And this is a red flag. You can't put students forcibly into programs like that and without changing the teaching at all and expect them to learn English. This is submersion. This is sink or swim. In terms of monitoring, some of the universities say they have trilingual education coordinators who go around and observe classes, but one monitor we talked to said they were just checking whether the faculty are teaching in English and not using other languages. So they're not providing any quality assurance in that sense. In terms of international students, again, most of the universities are trying to get international students on campus. One seems to have succeeded. They have 700 students at the moment. Other universities don't have that, but they're working on it. In terms of support for faculty, there are free language courses, and I think every university in the study, I'm still double checking those data, offer extra money for faculty members who teach in English. The challenge is that the language courses are short. It's not enough time for them to develop the language they need to talk about their subject in English. And occasionally teachers said they'd rather have a reduced workload than an increased salary because they are taking more time and energy to teach in English. And then finally, there are schools that offer free language courses for students. Some of these courses I'm learning in secondary analysis of the data are actually paid for by the Ministry of Education. Some of them are at their university, some of them require traveling to another city. But students told us they don't have time to attend because at master's and PhD level, they're often working full-time. So I'm almost done. For the next steps, as I said, what you saw was based on 2 phases of our research study. The third phase, which we're now attempting to do starting next week in an online format, is we are sending recordings of this presentation to teachers and students and administrators from the 6 universities where we collected the data a year and a half, 2 years ago. And we're using a process called the Action Research Self-Assessment process that was developed by Betty Leask. We're asking them to review and reflect on the findings we presented. Again, I was very strategic here. The findings that were presented were compiled across all 6 universities. We're not standing here and saying, oh, well, you know, this university by name did this well, but did terrible in this. And this university over here by name, you know, is a total kashmar. We're not here to do that. We're very aware that that's exactly what our institutions are afraid of. What we're trying to do is present across the universities a general pattern, and then get people from within individual universities to say, is that us? And if it is that something we want to address or celebrate? So we want them to review and reflect on what we presented, and then to imagine what they would like to see differently about EMI and polylingual education in their universities. And then based on that, when they meet with us live next week or the week after, they will have a chance in groups to revise and to start drafting an action plan that then the administration will have to decide how and when to act and how and when to evaluate. But we will offer, if the universities want it, informal support. As I said in the video, we're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to work with you to help you identify what you think your university needs, and to offer some additional recommendations, which are in a separate PowerPoint that I don't have time to present today, with additional recommendations from the literature about how to address some of these issues. And then this is the form that we will ask them to use to reflect before they meet with us next week. That breaks down the 5 areas in which I conducted the presentation. So that's all I have. And again, I want to emphasize, especially for those who came late, that what I presented is based on the results of a research study that I conducted with a team of faculty and PhD and MA and multilingual education students. And it draws on some of the principles that we talk about in multilingual education, such as translanguaging. It indicates some of the potential opportunities for research, both in terms of your individual thesis work and in terms of opportunities to work with professors in research projects. But I have been talking way too long. My voice is starting to hurt, my throat rather, and I'm starting to lose my English. So I'm going to stop there and see if you have any general questions, not only about the presentation, but about NU GSE MA programs and PhD programs in education. So again, thank you for your attention. Oh, and your silent applause. Hello,
Hello, Professor.
Nara.
I'm so happy to be here, and it feels like I'm back in our classroom. And
Yes.
thank you very much for sharing your research results. It was really interesting because my thesis was also about EMI at a university. Yeah, so I saw the drawbacks, some weaknesses of my paper. I mean, some points maybe that I should have considered. And I want to say thank you. We didn't have an opportunity to do so because of the pandemics and everything. Yeah. And I congratulate you on the Teachers' Day. Thank you very much for being our teacher, for contributing to this program, for for making such a great contribution to this program. I see now the results of what I gained at Nazarbayev University Graduate School of Education. Yeah, so thank you very much.
Oh my goodness, I should have put Kleenex closer. Thank you so much for those kind words. But don't sell yourself short. In fact, let's see, nuedu.kz. I hope Oh, that's supposed to go to everybody, sorry.
And also thank you, Professor, for saying that you are, you really want to students to have like academic skills in Kazakh. I think this is really important to disseminate the knowledge in Kazakh language as well.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of knowledge in Kazakh to disseminate as well. I mean, we need to learn more about Abai and other information in Kazakh, absolutely. So I just posted a link to the Nazarbayev University repository, which includes master's theses. I hope Anara's is there. Again, Anara, I want to emphasize, this is something that I developed. You know, you're talking really 5 years of work, well, 4 years of work it took to develop what I presented. You had a year, maybe 2. So, and really what I presented was too much for one project, but I've learned my lesson now, but thank you for that. So, and yeah, hopefully we'll be able to get some of these results published, and then students will be able to use our frameworks.
That's what I wanted to ask, Professor. When is it expected? Maybe you know already.
No, again, I have one paper now in print from the previous study. We haven't even submitted the manuscript to the journal. So, you know, hopefully that will only take, hopefully we'll have that submitted by the end of the year, and will only take a year and a half to get the paper accepted. My current track record is 2 years, but I think I'm becoming a better writer. So, yeah, if you want to read an early version, a preprint version as they call it, email me and I'll send you the draft. But you can't then circulate it or cite it. It just, all you can do is offer feedback. All right. Okay, thank you, Anara. Any other questions or comments on the presentation or on the programs?
Love to ask a question. And hi, Bridget, it's great to see you, by the way, and thank you for
the classic question. Where can we find recordings of this presentation? Aidana, that's a question to you.
So I will send after this meeting. You did the pre-registration for this meeting, so I have collected all the emails. I will send it in the evening.
And be sure to save it, and in 16 years you can show it to your son and say, look.
I will.
Yeah, Almira, this is a really important point. That what I'm talking about with trilingual education and skills development is in higher education, there are similar issues in secondary schools as well. And I say it's an important point for 2 reasons, is I tend to think that higher education, particularly postgraduate education, is somehow special and different. And it's not. I mean, there are a lot of common issues, which means some of the frameworks that we're developing and some of the findings can be applicable, and some of the fixes that we're talking about can be applicable to secondary education. But also, and it's kind of sad, but some of the people that we spoke with at the universities are hoping that as they get more students from places like Nazarbayev intellectual schools or from mainstream schools that have had trilingual education, that somehow these problems will disappear. And I didn't have the heart to tell them as I was interviewing them that no, I don't, because I read all the theses about all of the problems in secondary education too with 3 languages, that I don't know that that is a realistic goal. But I think the universities are, especially the regional universities, are so desperate for good students that this is where they have to place their hope. All right. Any other comments or questions?
Can you hear me?
Hello, Professor. My name is.
Hello. How are you, Aaliyah?
Thank you. May I introduce myself shortly?
Yes,
I made a message, the first message about myself. I I'm a teacher of English, graduated in 2001, and I graduated MA in Educational Leadership and Management at Warwick in 2015.
Congratulations.
I had an experience of teaching at universities for about 12 years. And now I'm very eager to get enrolled into the PhD in education at Nazarbayev University. May I have some key advice, because I had a negative experience of not accepted.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering, what can I do more? What can I correct? Maybe.
Well, first of all, let me say that I wasn't on the PhD admissions committee. Did you get an interview, or were you rejected at the application stage?
Yes, at the application stage.
Okay. I will tell you, for the PhD program, the number one most important part of the application is the research proposal. So you want to make sure in your research proposal that you are articulating, you are showing your capacity to conduct research at a PhD level, that you're able to articulate a clear problem, clear research questions, a clear methodology, a clear theoretical framework, and the significance of that study, and to cite appropriate literature for that in education. I would also encourage you, before you apply again, to think about who might you want to work with at NUGSE and why. I don't know that this is considered always critical, but in general, when you're applying for a PhD, and I hope all of the first-year master's students are listening as well, you want to make sure that there's going to be a reasonable match between your topic and at least one or two of the faculty members. So you said you're interested in educational leadership and management, but did you specify a topic that is both specific enough and appropriately connected to the work that current professors are doing? So I'm in multilingual education. Every now and then I get a student who says, oh, I want to do a PhD with you, Bridget, and I'm really interested in analyzing the stylistics of Russian literature that's been translated into Kazakh. Well, gee, that sounds like a fascinating topic, and in theory it sounds bilingual, but neither I nor anyone that I know of in the multilingual education faculty is prepared to supervise a thesis on that topic. I would probably send them in that case to SHSS Eurasian Studies, where they have people who specialize in literature and linguistics to look at that issue.
I see. Yeah, that's very cool.
Can I
So
add
what is
something
it that-
here, Bridget?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Are we running out of time?
No, I want to add to the Alia's questions. So there are like number of questions, you know, the applicants who didn't like enroll at this or other years to GSE. And the similar case is that I don't know why, but applicants tend to say like, oh, there is a very little research in Kazakhstan on this topic and so on and so that. But as the GSE and EU is, you know, been 10 years from now, there are like many research papers written, especially within the Kazakhstani context. So I would like really highly recommend to go just at the EU website, search for any articles that were published by EU or GSE professors. They did many great work, you know, collecting data within Kazakhstan. So I guess this will add value into your application.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bridget.
And if you have additional questions, you can email me and tell me what your topic is, and I'll try and connect you with a professor who might be appropriate for that topic.
Okay, thank you. May I send you my research proposal?
If you wish. I can't promise to read it, but I'll at least take a look at it and offer some general feedback. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Anything else, Kara? Is there anything you wanted to say?
Can you hear me? I'm not sure.
Now I hear you. Okay.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
couldn't hear you over the sound of my own voice.
No, it's okay. I was
Oh,
trying
it's so good to see you. It's been so long.
I know. How are you? It's so good to see you. Yeah.
I'm
Thank you
good.
for the talk. It was really, really interesting. I really enjoy seeing this work in Kazakhstan. I was just curious about one question. You mentioned that students are highly motivated to learn English. But I'm just wondering if you have any more to say, or if you have any more data on how that translates into what kind of self-study practices does that translate into? Because, yeah, I'm just curious. I can see that a lot of students are quite convinced of the importance of English, but I'm just wondering, to what extent do they do something about it then?
I mean, to be honest, again, that would be a better question for Anas Hajar, our assistant professor, who does research on language learning strategies. And his student, Anara's classmate, Gulmira. Anara, what is Gulmira's last name?
Batirkhanova.
Batir,
Let me
thank you.
type it in the chat.
I got it. She just did a thesis on this as well. In our study, and this is, I hate to say this is part of the challenge of collecting data in Kazakhstan, I find. In our study, students don't really elaborate their thoughts, even when they have the opportunity to speak in Russian. They're not as reflective as I would hope they would be. So a lot of times they would just say, oh, I study on my own. They might say something like, oh, we watch movies, we watch the internet. I'd have to scrub the data more closely to see if they mention anything specific. But from what I recall, they didn't really go into depth. They didn't tell these long stories. Or they would go also to, like they would take IELTS courses. So they would take private language courses on their own to learn how to write the IELTS essay. But that's all I recall offhand.
No, I was just curious. It just
Yeah, no, it's a good question to ask. And again, Kara Fleming is originally from the awesome city of Kansas City, which I desperately miss. Barbecue and
me too.
but is currently, did her PhD in Hong Kong and is currently an assistant professor at KIMEP in Almaty. And inshallah, maybe we'll be able to meet there face to face in May. I don't know, maybe that's optimistic, but.
Let's hope so, but we'll see.
And one participant is saying, I think we read Kara's works. Yes, probably I required you to read at least one of her book chapters. Yeah. So, all right, thank you. I think since we started a few minutes late, we have time for maybe one more question, but first I want to say a big welcome to Dinala Yerkin, who just got accepted to our new ZIP program, our 0-year program. So she has just started pre-studying in the master's program. So that's for people who show strong potential in our program, but maybe have an IELTS score that's below 6.5, and you get a year of English and academic skills development in that program. So yeah, again, I wish I could take the new ZIP program. I would love to relearn how to write, but it's too late for me. So again, Dinala, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Professor Bridget, for giving me the opportunity to be enrolled in the ZYP program. And I'm improving my English nowadays.
Yeah.
So it's very great to learn. And one of members of the university, Nazarbayev University. It's great, I think.
Yeah. Again, thank you for that testimonial. And I didn't give you anything. You earned your spot in that program.
Thank you.
Everyone who's in this program has earned their spot.
Thank you.
All right. As my English teacher used to say, I don't give A's, you earn them. All right. Any other comments or questions?
I just have a question about, we just yesterday finished our course essay, and my topic is about also about EMI, English Medium Instruction, and can I work on this topic in the future time, or?
Oh yeah, there's going to be work on this for years to come, at least until we switch to Chinese medium instruction. Yeah. In fact, you heard Anara say that she did her thesis on this, Marat did his thesis on this. I have a student right now, Kimbat Yesenbekova, who's doing her thesis on this. I mean, again, if you go to the NU repository and search for master's theses and dissertations from NU GSE, several of them touch this issue of English medium instruction. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. But make sure you read Maccaro. He's the authority on this right now, the leading authority.
Okay.
All right. Yeshova prosi, surata barma. Surata barma.
If I can just make one brief comment rather than a question.
Sure.
I think, the pointing out of the library issue, certainly something that I think resonates with everyone in Kazakhstan. I mean, we two universities are probably the best resourced, and even here, I still have access to HKU's library. And if I didn't have that, it would be quite difficult. And I really see that not as a failing of Kazakh universities, but as an issue with the global system of academic knowledge production. I don't think that's really a fault of, the university system here so much as it is a problem with how prohibitively expensive it is to have a good, access to books and journals. I mean, it makes the system inherently quite unequal. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to say, but can relate to that even.
Samgul is giving you the thumbs up. Yeah. And I just made a note of this because I'm waiting to see if a proposal of an abstract will be accepted for a special issue of the International Journal of the Sociology of Language on language policy and political economy and social justice. And so, yeah, I think there is a social justice element to what you've just said about, and then, the workaround for that is considered illegal, right? The Sci-Hub website, which wasn't that created by a Kazakh to give more equal access, and yet, she's criminalized for that. So, and DocHub and other things that I'm starting to see students are pulling papers from, partly because right now it's harder to access the existing paper library resources. I mean, yeah, the problem compounds upon itself. Yeah. Oh dear, dear-o, as my friend says. All right. Anyone have a happy note to end on? All right. Well, then, thank you again, everybody, for your attention and your time and your love and your support. And those of you who are thinking about applying to NU master's or PhD programs, I hope you will. And those of you who are already in NU GSE master's or PhD programs, I hope you will tell your friends to apply. And also encourage them, if they're looking strictly for a teaching degree, to consider the Masters in TESOL program at KeyMep.
And not to horn in on your advertising, but we actually have a PhD program now, just brand new.
You have a PhD program as well. All right. In what?
Yeah, it's just open stuff. Educational leadership and management. Hoping to open one in applied. Yeah.
Okay,
as soon as we get the license.
So where's my friend? Hope to see you all one way or another, face to face, inshallah, in the future.
Thank you, Professor. It was a highlight of the day and the week, month.
Oh, having you here was a highlight. Thank you. Mwah. Oh, all right.